What's up guys, my name is Greg and in this video I'm going to show you the basics of Bubble and what you need to know before building your first app. So what is no-code? In simple terms, no-code is a way to build websites and applications without writing code. This usually involves a visual interface with drag and drop functionality. Any website builder should be considered a no-code tool, but here are some of the examples that come up when you Google no-code platform. You got platforms like Webflow, Squarespace, Bubble, Glide, Flutterflow, Ori, Softer, and many others. They all vary in complexity and functionality, but they're all no-code platforms. So why do I care about no-code? I get a lot of ideas for things that I want to build, but it takes so much time to build something from scratch. Now, full disclaimer, I am a software engineer and I love to build apps and software development. But over the years, I realized that building apps from scratch takes a lot of time, even the most simple thing. So for me, the biggest advantage of no-code is that it takes a lot less time to get something decent out there that you can validate. And then I can decide if I want to spend more time on it, without spending months or years building something that might not even see the light of day. So the less time that I spend on building things, the more things I can try. But for other people, the biggest advantage is that you don't have to know how to code. This sounds too good to be true. So what are some of the disadvantages? There's still a learning curve and you still need to learn some technical concepts, but you don't have to learn any programming languages. Some people say that no-code tools cannot scale. If you're worried about scale, you can always build things in such a way that you can migrate to a different platform or build things from scratch and slowly migrate out of no-code into something a little bit more custom that's built from scratch. Now, while scaling is something that should be considered, it's not something that you should be optimizing for before you even launch the thing. Because when you're starting out, you just want to get something out there and validate that it works. Then you can worry about scaling. Now that that's out of the way, I'll cover the basics of Bubble. In the future, I plan to explore other platforms to build different applications. But in the next few videos, I'm going to show you how to build an app in Bubble that connects to ChatGPT. So what is Bubble? Bubble is a platform that lets you build websites and applications with custom functionality without any sort of programming. Bubble has a lot of flexibility when it comes to building logic and event-driven functionality that some other tools might not offer. So when choosing which platform to use when building your app, you have to understand the capabilities of the platform and also what you want your app to be able to do. For example, some of the basic functionalities that I look for would be users logging in and signing up, a database, event-driven logic. For example, when something happens like the user clicking on a button, you can add an action so that something else happens. And this would be how you add logic into the application. It could be something like sending an email, creating a subscription, or creating a record in the database. Subscription pricing. You should be able to charge users for the service that you are providing. And this functionality often shows up in the form of integrations to payment platforms like Stripe or PayPal or Braintree. Okay, let's jump into Bubble and we can get started. I'm going to show you the different areas of Bubble that I think are important to get started and not feel overwhelmed. So once you go to Bubble and sign up, create your account, this is how the dashboard looks like. So go to create an app, give it a name. I'll name mine YouTube demo. Then click get started. Now here is Bubble trying to sell you into their subscription, but we don't need this for now, so I'll click start with basic features. Here you can edit the application name. This is fine for now, so I'll click next. Here you can change the default font of the application. I'll change this to Roboto. Here you can change the default colors throughout the application. Again, this is something you can always adjust later. The last step is to add any plugins. At the moment, we don't need any of these features, so I'll continue. This is the first screen that you see when the app is created, and this is the UI designer. Anything that you add in this page is what shows up visually for users of your app, so this is where you design your application. You can drag and drop visual elements from the left, like text or buttons or anything else that you see here. When you add an element to the page, you will see a property inspector panel pop up, or you can also double-click in an element to show this panel. Here you can change the dimensions of the element, the style, what it's connected to, and how it is laid out on the screen. For example, here I set the button width to 300 and the name of the button. Also, notice that different elements have different properties. For example, the icon has an icon image and the button has more properties in general. You can delete any elements by hitting the backspace key in your keyboard. So I'll get rid of these elements as we don't really need them right now. Now let's talk about pages. This menu here is where you add and remove pages from the application. When you first create the application, it will have some default pages like the index page, which is the starting page, as well as a 404 page. To add a new page, click on Add New Page. Now give it a name and hit Create. Once it's created, you end up with another blank page. And to change between pages, you can go back to the page menu in the top left and select a different page. Both pages are pretty blank, so I'll add some text to differentiate them. I'll call this Dashboard and increase the font and center it. We can then preview how this looks by clicking on the preview button in the top right corner. And that's how this page would look if it was published. Now let's explore some of the other menus in Bubble. First, let's go back to the index page. Workflows. This is where you add logic and event-driven behaviors to your app. Then we got the data menu. This is where the information that you store in the app lives, like the user's data. This is the styles menu, where you can edit the look and feel of the elements on the whole app, as well as fonts and colors. Plugins. This is where you add extensions or third-party apps into your application. You usually add some plugins to connect with other apps like payment providers and other apps. And finally, there is settings and logs menus. Let's look into the data menu in a bit more detail. Here you have a default data type, users, which represents a user in your application. Under fields for user type, you can see the different information that can be stored for a user. These come by default. You have something like email, modified date, created date, and slug. If you go to the data tab, you will see a table. This is similar to an Excel spreadsheet, except that it's not because this is a database. At the moment, this is showing me the table for users, but since there's no users, then this is kind of empty. Let's go back to the Data Types tab and create a new type of table. I'll add a table called Post. Now this shows me the default fields for the post, and it includes the creator of the post, which would be a user. For this new table, I'll create a new field called Title. The field type is going to be text, and I hit Create. I'll add another field called Content, and this type is going to be text as well. There's multiple types of field that we can add to store all sorts of information, like numbers, a range, dates, files, images, and even addresses. Now let's look into the workflow menu. This button here is to add a workflow, but it needs something to trigger the workflow. So the options we get here are based on what's available to this page. Remember, we're on the index page and there is no elements in it yet. So these events are more like what I would call lifecycle events, like the page loading or the user logging in. So if we go back to the design menu of the index page, we can add an element that interacts or triggers that workflow. I'll add a button and call it create post. Keep in mind this is in the index page. I'll go back to the workflows menu and click on add event. Now the menu shows me elements as events. From here we can select when an element is clicked. That automatically selected the button as the element since it's the only element in the page. But if there were more elements, we would have to select the element that you want to trigger this workflow. So to show you that, I'll create another button. But first, I'll create a new data type that will interact with a different workflow. I'll call this one comment. And I'll add a new field called content of type text. Now we have three types of data: users, posts, and comments. And if you go back to the data tab, you will see some empty rows in the tables. This is because we have not added any entries to the database yet. Let's go back to the UI builder and add a new button that is going to add a comment entry when you tap on it. I'll change the background color of the button so we can differentiate it. From here, I'll go back to the workflow menu and delete anything that's there to start from scratch. When you click on the Add an Event square or button, there is an Elements option in the menu. That's because we now have different elements on the page that can be connected to a workflow, like the buttons we just added. Select when an element is clicked. This will bring up this pop-up menu where you can select the element that you want to trigger this workflow when clicked. This element drop-down will show you the elements that are available and will give you a preview of the elements so that you know which one you're selecting. So it shows the create post button and the create comment button. Alternatively, you can go to the UI builder and start adding a workflow from the button property inspector as well. This will create a workflow with the onClick event. I'll continue with this and select the action that I want to happen when the button is clicked. Under the data option, I'll select create new thing. Things is the term Bubble uses to refer to the data and adding records to it. As data usually represents things in the real world, then it makes sense that this is called things. But normally in a software development, you find this as a data type. Once it's selected, a new pop-up will ask for the type of thing that you want to create. The options will be comment and post, since those are the two different tables that we added previously. I'll go and select post. From here, we can add another field to populate when this post is created in the database. So from the fields that we added before, we got content and title. I'll select title first. Bubble gives you a wide range of options to choose when deciding how to populate the fields. It could be dynamic data that the user entered. It could be data from an external source. It could be data from an event or anything else that you can think of. For now, I'll use arbitrary text and type anything in there. I'll do the same for the content field. So when the button is clicked, a new post entry will be added to the database, and it will have the content that we set here. I'll go back to the UI builder and do the same with the create comment button. Now that both buttons are configured to create post and comment entries, we can go and test it in the preview. I'll click on the buttons a few times. Then I'll go back to Bubble Editor. Then go to the data menu, and under app data, we go to the all posts button, and this will show you the posts that were created for each button click. The data is all the same because the posts were created using the same arbitrary text for all posts. And the same thing with the comment. I made 2 clicks and now there is 2 comments. Okay, so that covers some of the basics for Bubble. I'm going to be exploring some of the other areas like the plugins and styles and settings in other videos. Hopefully this video gives you a better idea of how Bubble works and what you're able to do with it. In the future, I'm going to be covering a lot of these areas in more depth, and I'm also going to be exploring some of the other areas that we didn't cover in this video. If you're interested in learning more about Bubble, the next video will cover the setting up of login and sign up pages as well as navigation. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.